An impactful lore reveal can change the way you see a story. Kirby's famous for iconic reveals such as his option to canonically write death threats or the biblical origin of microtransactions. This is why I want to take a broader look at the franchise and highlight some of the most memorable lore revelations players still remember. However, I want to clarify that I will be focusing only on lore reveals that occur through gameplay, as they tend to feel far more severe. While pause-screen descriptions serve as the backbone of Kirby's history, they primarily appeal to dedicated fans. In most cases, casual players don't even notice them, which is why I will prioritize moments that are not necessarily very important but can be understood and appreciated by anyone if they are paying attention. Meta Knight's face reveal is such an example and arguably the oldest and most memorable lore reveal in the entire series. It might sound like an exaggeration, but this was essentially the first time the franchise hinted at something deeper without fully exploring it, laying the foundation for the kind of intriguing, subtle storytelling we come to appreciate from Kirby's lore. What makes this even more striking is that Kirby's Adventure was only the second game in the series. This proves that building up intriguing background details isn't just a recent trend. It has been a core element of the franchise from the very beginning, even if on a smaller scale. Meta Knight was newly introduced in Kirby's Adventure and quickly became an all-star thanks to his mysterious presence and unique boss fights. Unlike most opponents, he offers Kirby a sword, making this one of the rare boss battles designed around a specific copy ability. Today, players have the chance to decline the offer, but in Adventure there was no such choice. Meta Knight is fast, consistently jumping around and difficult to hit due to a small size, forcing players into a head-to-head duel with Sword Kirby where every close-range attack carries the risk of taking damage. It was an intentional design choice that set him apart from other adversaries. It's important to remember that in Adventure there were no complex combos or directional inputs, just a single sword swing with no option to block. The combination of the surprisingly high difficulty, honorable duel setup and overall intensity of the fight cemented Meta Knight justifiably as a major character in the series. But the true highlight, the instance that made this battle iconic, is his face reveal. As his mask shatters, he swiftly covers himself with his cape and vanishes from the scene, leaving players with more questions than answers. It might not seem like a big deal today, but even now people still question Meta Knight's very existence and his connection to Kirby. If you type "is Meta Knight" into Google, the first result is almost always about how these two characters are related. Not advised for Sonic fans, proving just how timeless this mystery remains to be. Is Meta Knight a Kirby? Does that mean there are more of them? Why is Meta Knight so strong in Brawl while Kirby sucks in every Smash title? Why does Kirby seem so childlike and less developed as a creature compared to Meta Knight? Is Meta Knight Hispanic? Although Kirby's Adventure doesn't answer any of these very important questions, that's probably for the best as it fuels discussions and theories. The fact that we've never received a definitive answer to Meta Knight's origin speaks volumes. It's simply more engaging when some mysteries stay unsolved. That said, I do appreciate the animations show attempt to provide explanations in a way that makes sense. While the show exists in its own separate universe and isn't canon to the games, it still serves as a fun reference point for those looking for an official take on Meta Knight's background. Not as iconic but just as intriguing is Gooey, one of Kirby's many support characters. First introduced in Dreamland 2, he didn't truly come into his own until Dreamland 3, where he took on the role of the secondary playable character alongside Kirby. Much like the protagonist himself, Gooey can copy abilities, swallow enemies with his ridiculously long tongue, and even share similar personality traits, though he leans more towards the dorky side. These similarities alone raise plenty of interesting questions worthy of an entire video, but I want to take a look at a specific moment in Dreamland 3 that regularly goes unnoticed. After defeating DDD and completing the game at 100%, Dark Matter reveals itself once again as a true final boss, leading to one of the most haunting last battles in the series. While the fight's eerie atmosphere and Zero's unexpectedly violent finisher tend to steal the spotlight, there's an important detail many players overlook. If you're playing with a friend, Gooey naturally joins the battle, but unlike Kirby, he doesn't wield the love stick. Instead, he undergoes a similar transformation, resembling Dark Matter itself. Star Allies reveals this technique to be called Morg Matter, while Dreamland 3's manual describes Gooey as made from the same stuff as Dark Matter. It's most likely Gooey was simply an unsuccessful offspring created by Zero, sharing no evil traits despite his relation to the antagonistic side. Star Allies leans even more heavily towards this connection, with aerial attacks fully embracing the dark energy we come to expect from a regular Dark Matter. Who am I? Where? What time is it? Who cares? Born to slay gods. The reason I consider this unveiling think so significant is the understated way it's presented, especially for a mere side character. There was no grand cutscene for Meta Knight's identity either, but every player inevitably witnessed it by just progressing. In contrast, Gui's transformation requires playing with a friend and achieving 100% completion to see the true ending. Even then, the game casually drops him into the moment without fanfare, suddenly surrounding him with those little orange orbs, raising questions about his true nature. This kind of subtle lore drop is exactly how I prefer character backstories to be told. Purposeful hints for fans without making it overly abstract or forced. It's clear he harbors no malice, though if you're duller than Kirby that might not be too obvious, but Gui represents one of the earliest examples of a character sharing lineage with a corrupt force, while proving that it doesn't dark matter where you come from. What truly matters is who you are, even if you're just a Gui. The reveal that Planet Robobot's final boss resembles Galactic Nova, implying the existence of multiple clockwork stars roaming the universe, is easily one of the most impactful moments in the franchise. Funnily enough, when I first played through the game, I didn't fully grasp the significance of it, and for some reason completely forgot about Galactic Nova. That definitely diminished my appreciation for the moment, but I have to assume it was a huge twist for players with actual functioning brains. After a relentless series of battles, Stardream, the powerful machine Kirby's trying to stop, merges with the Haltman Company's HQ, the Axis Arc, and sets out to mechanize the entire cosmos. The music foreshadows the upcoming reveal perfectly. The first phase carries the grandiose orchestration of the game's main leitmotif, blended with traditional Kirby and even Halbert melodies. But as the battle progresses, the second phase shifts to an ominous tone, almost as if it's trying to warn the player that something is off. The massive metallic sphere doesn't exactly scream final boss, and its erratic teleportation combined with relatively mild attacks fails to sell the gravity of the confrontation. Piece by piece, you chip away at its exterior, catching glimpses of the core without fully exposing the truth. Then, as you push through the transition phase, the music cuts out. Stardream teleports directly before you. Its QTC eyes peer through the cosmos. The curious menu theme from the start of the game kicks in, and the strange, almost animalistic cry of the newly reborn Stardream echoes in your ears. The best lore drops don't linger, they hit suddenly, giving you just enough time to process the shock before throwing you right into the action. Gameplay-wise, it's just as rich in references. The seemingly random objects that spawn are a direct link to Nova's design, helping to set the final phase apart from the rest of the battle, one that thrives on the creativity of its enemies' attacks. This all contributes to the battle's peculiar tone, and if it wasn't obvious enough, painting Stardream gold in the true arena drives the point home even further. Although I couldn't fully appreciate this revelation at first, it still felt strangely off, almost unsettling, punctuating the impact it carries when viewed without proper context. Even for casual players who have never experienced Superstar or its remake, the game subverts expectations by introducing a final phase that feels completely unlike anything before. But for longtime fans, the moment sparks deeper questions. How many clockwork stars are out there? How did Haltman manage to find one? It adds an extra layer on top of all the mysteries and lore backgrounds the game already introduced, with Haltman and Susie, and was probably the first proper instance of a mainline title which threw a lore reveal so blatantly in your face. Star Allies is like the Bible of the Kirby series, a game often used to interpret vague lore myths, while falling regularly victim to either false translations or inaccurate conclusions. To this day, players are not quite certain how they should decipher characters like Void, and discuss their possible connection to the Kirby universe with deep passion. It would be a waste to not include something from Star Allies, and while there are a few options tired fans probably regard as noteworthy, I see most of them as a little too speculative and imprecise. This is why I consider Morpho Knight to be the most significant recent revelation. Despite only appearing in 2 games so far, the Crimson Knight has amassed an influence within the community that many characters could only dream of. A big part of his popularity likely stems from his edgy design, originating from a simple butterfly yet radiating the aura of a relentless executor. But who exactly is Morpho Knight, and why does he deserve a spot on this list? As with many other reveals we have seen, Morpho Knight's importance lies in the implications rather than just his introduction. Star Allies, the most lore-heavy game in the series, introduced the Crimson Knight as a secret final boss at the end of the guest star mode. Initially, it seems like Galacta Knight will serve as the ultimate challenge, until something unexpected happens. The seemingly inconspicuous red butterfly, a familiar sight in Kirby's opening cutscenes, suddenly appears and absorbs Galacta Knight transforming into Morpho Knight. Despite Galacta Knight being referred to as the strongest warrior in the universe, Morpho Knight matches his power effortlessly. His abilities include rapid teleportation, an expanding blade, and sound waves that turn allies into enemies. While the battle itself is distinct enough from other knights in the series, the true weight of this exposure comes from processing the deeper ramifications. Let's take a step back and see how often a butterfly appears at the beginning of a Kirby game. We have Dreamland, Return to Dreamland Triple Deluxe, Planet Robobot, and probably more I'm forgetting. Granted, the distinct red butterfly is more of a recent trend. Well, recent. And it's unlikely there was a secret twist planned all the way back in 1992. Even the directors left the question open-ended, never confirming if it's always the same butterfly, which keeps theories alive and fresh. But still, it's fun to imagine that Morpho Knight was there from the very first Kirby's Dream Land's intro, lurking in plain sight. The idea that this incredibly powerful entity has been subtly present in almost every modern title adds an uncomfortable sense of unease in retrospect. Seeing it in the Forgotten Lands intro after Star Allies made me invest in my funeral insurance. And that's exactly the effect the creators were likely going for. I mean the first part, hopefully not the second. That said, I hope Morpho Knight doesn't get overused in the future. Even though the butterfly's presence sets up the expectation that Morpho Knight might appear, it's just as intriguing to know that he could have been there all along, whether or not he actually reveals himself. Still, I have one small theory that adds to the potential horror. The butterfly is said to cast judgment upon lost souls, absorbing their power to be reborn as Morpho Knight. So it's safe to assume it seeks out beings of immense strength, characters who, in game terms, could serve as final bosses. But here's the unsettling part. Before Morpho Knight was ever introduced, the butterfly was often seen near Kirby. Sometimes it even landed directly on him. It was also near Meta Knight at the start of Return to Dreamland, the one character who managed to defeat Galacta Knight, its first confirmed victim. So, what if the butterfly has been trying to absorb Kirby all this time but keeps failing for some unknown reason? All it takes to claim a soul is a simple touch, as we have seen with Galacta Knight in Soul Forgo. There's no elaborate ritual involved. One could argue the target must be weakened or near death, but that only reinforces the theory. After many final battles, Kirby is left unconscious, vulnerable, yet the butterfly never succeeds in taking him. Maybe it assumes he's about to cross over and attempts to absorb his soul, only to fail once again with no clear explanation. Kirby is repeatedly proven to be immune to dark influences and corruption, embodying a being of pure, untouchable innocence. If the butterfly's purpose is to pass judgment, perhaps it cannot judge Kirby, because there is simply nothing to judge. The elevator scene in Kirby and the Forgotten Lands stands out as particularly unsettling. It doesn't necessarily disclose anything concrete, but its unpleasant tone makes it hard to ignore. The game is already filled with hidden details, shaped by its unusually abundant setting for the series. We still don't know how the original inhabitants of the Forgotten Land looked like, or how their civilization functioned. The only clues come from the scattered remains of their world, each environment offering small glimpses of a past long forgotten. In a way, nearly any moment in the game could be interpreted as a quiet revelation, but the elevator scene stands out for how deeply human it is. On the surface, nothing seems unusual. A cheerful female voice welcomes the player to an exciting tour, casually explaining details about Elf-Lyn and the facility's past. The upbeat narration is accompanied by an almost too happy tune, starkly contrasting the bleak atmosphere Kirby finds himself in. Then the camera pulls back, presenting rows of kidnapped Waddle Dees forced to work tirelessly. A chilling foundation to possibly the best build-up to a final in the series. Some players disliked how the Forgotten Land deliberately skips large portions of its story until the end, unlike Star Allies or Planet Robobot, which feature more direct mid-game dialogue. However, by keeping its cards close, the game builds anticipation, allowing the Forgotten Land's mysterious past to thrive, without being undermined by unnecessary exposition. It's also worth noting that this information isn't coming from just anyone. While Leongar eventually fills in the gaps, the initial exposition carries a sense of unease, describing the once cheerful Elf-Lyn as the product of a failed experiment. The mental image you form before the full truth becomes uncovered is far more powerful than any direct conversation or cutscene. This is one of those rare cases where tell, don't show actually works, and that's without even mentioning the presence of actual human language. At the start of the game, the introduction song is performed in a fantasy language, presumably the native tongue of the Forgotten Land. Unlike Super Kirby Clash's credits theme, this song exists within the game's world, making it a part of its lost culture. If this was the language once spoken by the land's former inhabitants, then why does the elevator voice suddenly switch to regular human language? Shouldn't it use the same fantasy words we just heard? Does it suggest the existence of multiple languages? This scene alone completed the Forgotten Land's enigmatic narrative perfectly, and the sheer shock value alone completely justifies it as truly iconic. You know what's even more shocking? They retconned the kiss. I'm calling the police. As you have probably noticed, the proportion of relevant discoveries tends to increase in newer games, and like I mentioned at the beginning, even seemingly minor side games such as remakes can introduce new information. This isn't surprising at all, considering that a remake was responsible for introducing post-screen descriptions in the first place, laying the foundation for Kirby's primary method of delivering additional story snippets without bloating the main narrative. Margolor's epilogue expands on the events of Return to Dreamland's ending, by showing the alien's redemption arc and how he remains to be alive. Fans have long wondered what exactly happened to Margolor after his defeat, and I'm glad the developers used these remakes to revisit stories players are eager to see explored. They could have easily left this version with a slightly altered extra final boss in the true arena and explained Margolor's whereabouts with good old post-screen descriptions, just as they did with all the other bosses. Maybe add another cookie cutter bonus campaign and call it a day. But what we received instead wasn't just a continuation of Return to Dreamland's story. It was a treasure trove of fascinating clarifications, not to mention Margolor's deeper characterization itself and the corresponding inner thoughts he holds whenever he upgrades an ability. You're sure you're over this? After completing a relatively short campaign and assembling a strangely familiar looking fruit, the true final boss emerges from the ruins of what appears to be a collapsing civilization, setting the stage for the most ambitious climax I have seen in an unassuming extra mode. The Master Crown, now transformed into a gigantic wrathful wreath by the power of the red fruit, forces Margolor to battle the very artifact that once controlled him. The irony behind the setup was self-explanatory, and facing an enormous tree, given the countless Wispy Woods encounters throughout the series, adds an extra layer of satisfaction for longtime fans. But the moment that truly took my breath away was the sudden tonal shift between the crowned Doomer and the true final boss. My expectations for this epilogue scope played a big role in how this moment hit me. The crowned Doomer already felt like an encore to the newly introduced rampaging Doomers, so I wasn't anticipating much more. But then the sudden switch to a sorrowful tone paired with the collapse of an advanced yet mysterious civilization we know nothing about completely crashed with the previous fight. It felt like I was playing a Xenoblade game. My first instinct was to connect it to the Forgotten Land, but you could just as easily interpret the setting as the possible downfall of the Ancients, or perhaps the origin of Holkandra, maybe even Margolor's own homeland. The background might have not stood out as much if not for the Forgotten Land's abandoned world, which directly mirrors this battlefield and makes it feel like a deliberate callback. However, the apparent connection to the Forgotten Land isn't the only reason this fight was included. After defeating his opponent, Margolor puts out a small sword and, using the last of his strength, transforms it into a massive blade. If you have played through the epilogue carefully, you might have noticed that most of Margolor's moves begin as weakened blueprints of his playable Star Allies moveset. His orb projectiles and gloomy needle attacks are nearly identical, for instance, but two key abilities are missing. One of them is the Ultra Sword, originally just a callback to Return to Dreamland's super abilities, now reimagined as a small origin story in Margolor's epilogue. This is the moment where he obtained the ability in the first place, and although it wasn't necessary at all to come up with some kind of logical explanation how Margolor learned all those techniques used in Star Allies, it was still included for dedicated fans who stayed for Star Allies updates. Why does this sound so sad? The other move I'm referring to is the explosive Gem Apple, which were replaced by magical bombs. Functionally they serve the exact same purpose, and aside from their design there's no real difference, making it all the more curious why the change was made in the first place. The icing on the cake, the final reveal, and to some the biggest lore drop in Margolor's epilogue is the undeniable connection between Return to Dreamland and the once non-canon Dream Kingdom, better known from Team Kirby Clash and Super Kirby Clash. While I described this moment as an unexpected revelation, the seeds were carefully planted throughout the extra mode, slowly nurtured until the big reveal. The absence of Star Allies Gem Apple attack, the giant Gem Apple you forge, and leitmotifs directly borrowed from Team Kirby Clash all point to the obvious connection. Yet it was still a satisfying finishing touch to have a single image during the credits confirm it outright. Team Kirby Clash and Super Kirby Clash are by no means essential titles, and were likely overlooked by a good portion of the player base, but the effort to weave them into a bigger picture is greatly appreciated. This giant castle? Now we know how he financed that shit. Margolor's epilogue may not inherit groundbreaking revelations, serving more to clarify existing ones rather than answer long-standing mysteries, but it doesn't always have to be about something entirely new. Sometimes a fresh new perspective on familiar ideas is all it takes to turn a world upside down. Those are his ears?